Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted to understand consciousness and life beyond death, then do we have the Living in a Mindful Universe show for you. Today I'll be talking with international #1 best-selling author of Proof of Heaven, neurosurgeon Dr. Eben Alexander, and his co-author and co-founder of Sacred Acoustics, Karen NEWELL, about their latest treasure, Living in a Mindful Universe. And that's just what I want to talk with them about today, about a neurosurgeon's journey into the heart of consciousness, emphasis on the heart, and what it means for us. That, plus we'll talk about Cannon Beach, Camp Magruder, the power of Haleakala, the sound of yippee, oh boy, and oh joy, and what in the world attracting humpback whales has to do with anything. So, gotcha. Welcome to the show, or back to the show, Eben and Karen. Are you both ready to shine?
Yes,
we are.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Woo-hoo!
Ready to shine.
So before we dive right into things, I love synchronicities. I love experiences of the universe, how it brings people together, how it holds things off until the time is right. We had a couple delays in recording this for a very, very special reason.
Yes, my only daughter gave birth to her first child. Yes. And
Big
Woohoo!
news.
very exciting. Yes, she was due on December 9th, finally went to be induced on December 18th, and then had an emergency C-section late that night, early Tuesday morning, and everyone is wonderful and fine, and it's so beautiful to be a grandparent.
Very, very cool. And that's a mighty congratulations. And of course, a woohoo!
Thank
Yes,
you.
a big
Woohoo!
woohoo. That's right.
Baby energy is absolutely pure and beautiful.
Well, I love it. And I really want to dive into Eben's experience for a little bit here. But as I was saying before the show, and Eben was giving you all the credit, but I bet there's some baby energy in there too. You are
Think
both,
so?
and Eben in particular is looking softer and softer, dropped more head to heart each time that I see you.
Well, that's a good thing, I think. Headed in the right direction.
I like it. All right, so let's go. I don't know if we want to say the wrong direction. However, let's go back to your career prior to November 10th, 2008. What were you doing?
Well, basically, I was a neurosurgeon. My father had been a neurosurgeon. I'd grown up in that whole world. I had spent more than 15 years on faculty at Harvard Medical School teaching neurosurgery. Thought I had some idea of how brain, mind, and consciousness works, but I will admit I was beholden to the kind of conventional scientific view known as physicalism or reductive materialism, where only the physical world exists, and so somehow you've got to explain consciousness as being produced by the brain. And I realized that nobody really could explain that at all well. Not that we didn't have, rough theories about it. We actually had no clue how it could possibly work. And then, of course, everything shifted with my NDE, and it's been a radical shift.
I want to pause you for a brief second, and we're going to talk about that radical shift. But what would you tell people if they had an experience before your NDE? What would you tell people, and what would you be thinking?
Well, basically, I thought any such reports were hallucinations. They were tricks of the dying brain, because I subscribe to the conventional scientific worldview that the physical world is all that exists. Therefore, you have to somehow explain consciousness as arising from the physical workings of the brain, because if only the physical world exists, then obviously that must be the case. And yet I was aware that nobody seemed to have any clue how that worked, but the implications are very profound. That outdated model that I worshipped before my coma was very clear that consciousness is an epiphenomenon, an illusion of the chemical reactions, electron fluxes in the brain. It's also very clear in saying that our existence as human beings is birth to death, nothing more. And all of that kind of talk about incredible experiences of ultra reality when people died, I thought were just, a waste. Chemical reactions, hallucinations, who cares? And that's why it was so important to go through what I went through. Now, the other implication of that conventional scientific worldview is that free will is a complete illusion. that no human being has ever had any free will, that we're all just kind of passengers, basically, at the whims of the chemical reactions in the brain, giving us this an illusion of consciousness, but very clear that we could not possibly have any free will. Now, all of that has shifted because I realize now that that's not the way the world works. And the good news is the entire scientific community is also going along a pathway of discovery very parallel to what I'm having to go through personally in trying to explain my own experience. And I think that is what is such a gift of all this.
Thank you. And I want to dive into your story. But before then, it occurs to me, Karen, if you had heard him saying this stuff and believing this stuff when you first met him, that there is no such thing of consciousness, that it's all chemical reactions, it's all a physical reality, what would you have thought of him?
I just would have thought he had a belief system I didn't ascribe to. I would have thought he didn't really understand how the world really worked. And I had conversations with people just like him who believed there was birth to death and nothing more. And after a while, you just let them believe what they're going to believe, and you figure they'll find out for themselves. And he did.
I did.
So what is then, thank you, what is meningoencephalitis?
Well, basically, in my particular case, it was a bacterial infection, and bacterial is much, much worse than viral. Most 80% of meningitis cases are viral, but almost nobody ever dies of viral meningitis, as opposed to bacterial. 100% of people die from bacterial meningitis if they're not treated with modern antibiotics. I mean, literally 100%. It never lets anybody survive. But even in the cases treated, they can be wrecked, and many of them go on to die anyway. And of course, the miracle to my doctors and to myself, as I spent months recovering and learning how sick I was and regaining all of my neuroscientific knowledge, was how could I have surviving it was rare but not miraculous. Surviving it meant a 2% probability. Mm-hmm. But to actually have a full return of all my mental functions and memories by 2 months out is truly an extraordinary miracle that is inexplicable from the viewpoint of my physicians. And that's why I'm often asked to speak at medical and surgical groups about this kind of issue. But meningoencephalitis is basically an infection of the entire surface of the brain. Mm-hmm. And the reason for me it was such a gift is because the surface of the brain is the part that makes us human. Modern neuroscience pretty much believes that every bit of what we experience as human beings, everything we see and smell and hear, all of our logical thinking, rational thought, linguistic brain, executive function, realizing where our body is in space compared to the rest of the world, every bit of that depends on the high-level neural calculator of the neocortex. And that's why meningoencephalitis is such a perfect model for human death, especially an extensive case like mine that involved all 8 lobes of my brain mm-hmm. and put me into coma within 3.5 hours and left me there for a week. That's an extraordinary set of circumstances, especially given my neurologic exams and my scans and my lab values, that this was an extremely deadly meningoencephalitis. And yet, somehow I had a complete recovery. Now, in the when you read the NDE literature, the near-death literature, you actually encounter fairly commonly stories of people who have had recoveries that are completely beyond explanation from Western medicine. And from my point of view, this is simply an example of healing that goes far beyond placebo effect. Placebo effect is very powerful. The effect of mind over matter, that if we believe we're doing something to get better, that in fact we can get better. People even have a complete resolution of stage 4 cancers because they believe they're taking something that could make them better. So placebo is extremely powerful. And I would just say this kind of miraculous recovery in the setting of an NDE is something along the same lines, but probably a little more powerfully evidential about the reality of mind over matter and spiritual realm.
Thank you. So if we go through the timeline, and it started, if I understand right, November 10th, 2008, which is coincidentally Jessica's birthday. So I was like, wow, November 10th, very intriguing. So good. Walk us through on a timeline basis what happened that you heard about later in this world. And if you can, then briefly take us on this journey, which one of the fascinating things you said is that the surface of the brain is where we have, it makes us the human and lets us know where we are in time and space. And on the journey you went, there was no, in a sense, where I am in time and space.
Well, the whole thing started in what I call the Earth from my view, a very primitive, coarse, unresponsive realm. Mm-hmm. Now, it's important to point out that for the entire journey, the whole spiritual journey, the near-death experience that I had, never was there the tiniest evidence at all of Eben Alexander's life before coma.
That's
I was
what I mean.
Completely amnesic. I had no words, no language, no memory of Earth, this universe, humanity, of being alive. Every single bit of my memories from life before coma vanished. Now, of course, when I first came out of coma and then was recovering, I thought, well, that incredible loss of memory made sense because I thought, mistakenly, based on that conventional neuroscientific teaching, that somehow memories are stored in the brain. Mm-hmm. What I've come to discover is no, memories are not stored in the brain at all. So amnesic at the very beginning in this kind of earthworm-eye view, this dark, unresponsive realm, but I was rescued by a slowly spinning white light that came packaged with a perfect musical melody, and that was served as a portal up into a rich, ultra-real gateway valley. And in that valley, of course, there were many Earth-like features, a tremendous, lush plant life with no signs of death or decay. I was a speck of awareness on a butterfly wing with millions of other butterflies all looping and spiraling in vast formations. There were many beings down below us who I came to describe as dressed in simple peasant garb. And in my writings in those early months out, I said that these were souls between lives, lots of joy and merriment. And it was all being fueled because up above this lovely valley with this lush plant life and dancing souls were swooping orbs of golden light, leaving sparkling trails against the sky. These were angelic choirs. And those sounds coming down from those choirs, anthems, chants, hymns, provided yet another portal up to higher and higher levels, all the way out to what I call the core, mm-hmm. infinite inky blackness, but filled to overflowing with an infinitely powerful healing force of that unconditional love, of that divine source of all that is, that God force that so many have described over thousands of years from all different religious systems, journeyers, seekers, etc. And I would cycle through these realms. And of course, all that's described in great detail for anyone who wants to read more about it in Proof of Heaven. And we refer back to a lot of that in our newest book, Living in a Mindful Universe, because of the incredible lessons that have come in the 9 years since that coma journey.
What can you tell us about the butterfly?
Well, it was absolutely rippling with color beyond any description. In fact, all of these butterflies had amazing colors. It's really kind of an odd thing. In looking back on it, you could have told me it was a magic carpet ride, and I would have bought into it. I called it a butterfly because to me that's exactly what it seemed to be like. But it was a beautiful pattern of colors that were always shifting, and many of the colors were far beyond the colors of the rainbow.
I want to jump in here because one thing that happened to me in a meditative experience is mm-hmm. that I had a spiritual guide come to me on a flying carpet and said, come on, let's go. We're going to go on this flying carpet. And then every time I would encounter him in future sessions, he would show up on a flying carpet. And I finally put it together that it kind of mirrored Eben's butterfly when someone wrote to him about the Islam religion, and somewhere in the Quran or something, they get on magic carpets. And so it's just language for a similar sort of material, but not the material of this world. Right. It's so interesting.
It's intriguing too that you mentioned guide. A guide kept visiting you because Eben, you also had a very special guide and had epiphany about this guide much later.
That's true. It probably the most fundamental lessons that I harvested from this beautiful odyssey deep in coma were the messages from the guide that you're referring to. There was a beautiful girl beside me on the butterfly wing, and I'll never forget her sparkling blue eyes and high forehead, high cheekbones, broad smile, soft brown hair, her simple garb, very simple but colorful. She never said a word to me, but her thoughts came directly, and not just thoughts, not just like the words of thought, but the power of the emotions came directly into my awareness. You are deeply loved and cherished forever. You will be taken care of. You have nothing to fear. And I cannot tell you how absolutely reassuring and beautiful and comforting and endearing and connecting those thoughts were coming directly into my awareness. And of course, those who've read Proof of Heaven, this is a little bit of a spoiler alert, but at the end of that book, I describe how 4 months after my coma, when my recovery of memories was beyond complete, that's when I received a picture in the mail that absolutely nailed it home for me who that beautiful girl on the butterfly wing was. The deep mystery was I'd read more and more of the near-death literature after my coma, realized she should have been someone of great importance to me in my life, and yet I knew her so well from having met her in that setting that I also knew I had never met her in the physical world before. And that was a deep mystery. And that mystery started to come together and have some solutions when I discovered who that beautiful girl was, as I describe at the end of the book, Proof of Heaven.
So I guess we won't give that spoiler away, but it is fascinating. No, it is way beyond fascinating. It is... The title is very interesting, and I want to get in there in a moment, Proof of Heaven. But if we're looking for a word, proof of anything, that may have been it right there.
Well, I think it's absolutely proof that the brain is not the producer of consciousness. Because in fact, as my brain was progressively dismantled by this meningoencephalitis, I found that my conscious awareness didn't dim down towards nothing, as you would expect if the brain produced consciousness, but it actually expanded tremendously. So the brain is a reducing valve or filter that actually limits consciousness. We're conscious in spite of our brain. And that is what it is very much proof of. And then, of course, you have to go through all the other information and data and experience to try and say, well, what does it tell us? It's not the kind of Christian view of heaven, which is the view that I had grown up with. But of course, NDEs often give us brand new information. I mean, the more I talk with people and read accounts of NDEs, the more I realize the content of NDEs is very independent of our belief systems. But how we interpret it and report it often gets tainted by our prior belief systems. But the content is very real. It's part of a world that is even more real than this world. And that's why the content is so important. And that's why I think the study of NDEs tells us much more about the broader picture of our existence than just trying to sugarcoat it and fit it into some little religious orthodoxy.
Now, when you came back, you didn't... Who told you to start writing, and what did you not do initially after you came back?
Well, when I first came back from this, and I remember I was still kind of in shock. My brain was really wrecked when I initially woke up from coma. But in the next few weeks, things kind of righted themselves somewhat. I was actually discharged home 2 days before Thanksgiving, and then back in 2008. The next day, my oldest son, Eben IV, who was majoring in neuroscience in college, drove home. Now, he had spent 4 days and nights with a family when I was deep in coma. He knew enough neuroscience to know it was very, very bad news, that I probably wasn't going to make it through all this. And I remember he was just so elated when he came home when I was 2 days out of hospital. He gave me a big hug that morning. He got there about 6 in the morning. He'd driven 5 hours overnight just to surprise me. And he gave me a big hug. I still had an IV line in, getting antibiotics. And I remember he hugged me, and then he looked at me and he said, he told me a little bit later, he said, you were so much more present than you've ever been before, that I was like there was a light shining within me. And I remember telling him it was way too real to be real, which to me meant at that very early stage in my recovery, when I still hadn't even found out just how ill I had been. It was only in the next few weeks that I went back and looked at medical records, talked with my doctors, looked at the scans, and actually found out just how deathly ill I'd been. But this was very early, and I hadn't gotten any of that information. And I just said it was way too real to be real. And I thought somehow there was something about all that damage to my neocortex that must have allowed for this incredibly rich hallucination. My doctors had told me the dying brain plays all kinds of tricks, so I was trying to explain it as a hallucination. And of course, as I found out more and more in future months about how ill I was, I realized there was no place left in my neocortex for a hallucination to happen. And that's what was such a beautiful gift of it.
But Eben told you to write it down.
Eben told me to write it all down. That's what I'm getting at. He was write it all down before you read anyone else's NDE, because he could tell I wanted to read everything I could about it. But he was right. So I wrote about 20,000 words over 6 weeks, and only then did I get into reading the NDE literature and was shocked by how similar my experience was to so many others reported from all countries, all belief systems over thousands and thousands of years. The similarities far outweigh the differences.
When did you come up with or maybe how were you guided to write the book? And maybe you can tell us briefly how the title came about.
Well, I went through many stages of writing the book, and initially there was no book in the works. I was simply writing down my experience to record it and try and understand it. And then as I was going back to the hospital, talking with my doctors, found out just how ill I was, how I could not have had a hallucination or a dream or a drug effect. Then I was really driven, well, what sense can we make of this? It seemed much more real than this world. So what's going on? How can that happen? And so it was really this long process of working with other scientists, beginning with my own doctors, but then expanding and trying to get a better handle on it, which led to the notion of writing a paper for the neuroscientific literature about how the neocortex is not doing what we think it's doing. There's something far more profound about consciousness. And then just over time, it evolved into, well, this is way too big to get parked behind some, prejudicial editorial board. I need to get this story out to the world. There's much more going on here. It's a crucial kind of understanding we need to come to. And that's really how kind of a book idea evolved. And it was when I was shopping around for, first of all, an agent and then a publisher, that things kind of moved into the title phase. Now, I can tell you that the title of my manuscript, for example, in January of 2012, when I went up to New York to meet with various publishers, the manuscript I had in hand was N of 1. That is a medical term, like how many patients are in the series? 38 patients, so it's an N of 38. Well, this was an N of 1, which actually is very much of a misnomer, because just because my story proves a lot about the reality of consciousness, it doesn't mean that everybody's story doesn't contribute to this, because it's really an N of many million of the stories that are contributing. But anyway, there was a media meeting between the publisher and ABC News, and that's where somebody heard the whole story and blurted out, well, this is really proof of heaven. And it was because of that the publisher started moving towards changing the title. And when they first came to me with that title, I said, that's no good at all. For one thing, this is not a proof, because you never talk about proof in science. There is no such thing. All you have in science is refinement of hypotheses to fit experimental data. Proof only applies in mathematics. And this was not about mathematics, and it was not about, quote, Christian heaven. This was a much bigger concept of an afterlife that's fully encompassing of all that we've learned over thousands of years of humanity about the reality of our souls and their journeys both in the material realm and outside of it. So really it was, I was not very happy with that title, although I think N of 1 might have sold 30 books, and Proof of Heaven ended up selling more books, so I guess that's okay. But my mission is not really about selling books. It's about helping this world to wake up. And that's why, in fact, there was kind of a humorous little back and forth with the title for the most recent book, because there were several people involved with publishing it all who wanted to have heaven in the title, but we thought it was a bit misleading. And so Karen and I insisted that the word heaven should not be in the title. This is about something much bigger than just some little religious orthodoxy.
So I want to dive into how you've worked on these books together. Before I do that, what does it mean you want to help the world to wake up?
Well, our world is in a bit of trouble right now. The status quo is not working terribly well. I would say that we've gotten into big trouble with, I blame most of it on the divorce in the 20th century between human spirit and our kind of dominant scientific culture, which tended towards materialism. That is, only the physical world exists, and kind of taking us well away from what many humans felt about the spiritual reality of their existence and of this world, and a sense of connectedness, meaning, and purpose. And so really, living in a mindful universe, I think, is a very optimistic and a very rational and open-minded approach to all of the evidence to try and address the leading mysteries of cosmology and quantum physics and bundle them with the best current interpretations of human experience to try and make real sense of this world. And that's what living in a mindful universe is all about, is helping to wake us up. And you'll find this optimism, I think, is very well founded. Even though it's hard for people who read the headlines in today's news to be very optimistic, I see great cause for optimism that I think Karen and I share that comes through in living in a mindful universe. So it's important to wake the world up.
Woohoo!
Who is right?
I think we've got science, which is waking up, scientists that are waking up. And despite the fact that there's more of a polarity in today's world, I think even amongst whichever side of the pole you're on, these concepts which were buried before or never heard of are out there. And there's no putting the genie back in the bottle now.
Right. That is true. The genie won't fit.
So, Karen, how did you guys meet, and how have you been instrumental in this work?
Well, we met when we were both at a workshop where we were exploring using sound to access other realms of consciousness. He was there to kind of mimic the NDE experience he had, and I was just curious about learning more about the part of me that's beyond the physical body. And so when we met, I had already been working with Kevin Cossie on creating sound recordings. And when we let Eben listen to them for the first time, he was the first other person who listened to them besides just Kevin and myself. And he absolutely loved what they did for him. And this caused him, this was before Proof of Heaven came out, but it caused him to really support and recommend that we create these recordings for other people. And so he has become our really biggest listener, biggest kind of advocate of using these sounds of sacred acoustics. But from there, he wanted to actually teach people out in the world how to use the sounds to interact with consciousness. And that's when he said, yep, you're coming with me. And I was a little reluctant. I had always been a kind of a technology girl behind the scenes of everything, a project manager managing details, but never a face person. So this made me a little nervous, but he pretty much just put my name on a flyer for a workshop here in Charlottesville, and I kind of had to go. And so this grew into a whole series of workshops that we've given over the last, I guess, almost 5 years now. And it was really from all of that and talking about all of these concepts that we came to write this third book together. Interestingly, I was kind of the opposite of Eben. He was very married to the conventional materialist worldview that most of our society holds. And I had kind of tuned in from a very early age that really was all just nonsense, that of course there's more to our world than the physical. And I paid no attention to what people were saying in the mainstream world. Of course, that made me a little different. But as I went through life, I didn't necessarily talk about it all the time, but I lived my life as if my behavior, my thoughts, my emotions were influencing my unfolding reality. And I was able to do little experiments on my own, in my own, to see, I would think a certain way or behave a certain way, and then things would happen. And it was kind of like my own little laboratory. We all can do this ourselves. And I explored many, many, many ways to explore consciousness, not just sound. And I found that sound was very key, but also the heart was very key. And when I met Eben, he talked a lot about that universal love that he touched when he was having his near-death experience. And I knew other people with near-death experiences who said the same thing. They touched this amazing universal love. And I have touched it as well, but not through a near-death experience. And so when Eben talked about this love, I was like, yes, of course, we can all access that. And he said, what do you mean? I thought you could only reach it over on the other side. And I said, no, there's practices you can do. And that unconditional love that he speaks of and describes, I have felt. Now, we really don't know if I felt exactly what he did. We could say that exponentially, he may have felt a much stronger energy of love. But even if you can touch a small percentage of it, oh my gosh, it is absolutely amazing. And I have no doubt in what Eben and these other people speak of, that love is there waiting for us. But bringing it here, aligning with it, becoming more of that non-physical part of our body can help us learn and cultivate that connection.
Thank you. For both of you then, this just popped into my head to call it this way, and you guys have planted the seeds for this. What is a heart-based universe?
Well, I think about that a lot. And a heart-based universe is one in which every person in our society understands fully the power of the electromagnetic, energetic field of their heart. And I can explain the science behind that, but what the world would look like is that each person, when they wake up in the morning or throughout the day, tunes into that energy, has an intention of behaving and making choices only from a foundation of love. And then we all go out into our day and live from that space. And I know when people do that as individuals, it is very powerful. Imagining every single person on the planet doing it, anyone can do this. It matters nothing, your economic status, where you live, what your beliefs are, political, religious. Tuning into that heart is really an imperative that I think should be taught to infants and children and all through the school age. Here in the U.S., I don't know if they still do it, but when I was a child, we would all put our hands on our heart and do the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag as Americans. But what if we did something different? What if we put our hands on our heart and we taught our children to tune in every day to that energy? I don't think we'd have as much bullying going on. I mean, I just think it would work, but it's how do we get this to happen? This is one thing we would love to see happen.
Woohoo! I'm thinking just before the interview, I'm reviewing the book because I read it a couple times more or less leading up because we had rescheduled and stuff, and I'm reading the book, and Jessica, my wife, she's the producer, she's downstairs and she's on a conference call, and there's this booming voice coming through upstairs, and I can't get any reading done, and it's scrambling my brain, and I went to some beautiful Om music myself, and then afterwards went downstairs to her, and the old Michael would have been like, can you believe I couldn't think? What in the world? And instead, I hugged her like there was no tomorrow, and I got her giggling, laughing. I left the room, and I came back, and I hugged her and did a dance and said, you got me so I was out of my head. You got me so I was out of my head. And such an energy shift of taking it to a place of heart. And you're right. If we all did that, it would radically change everything. Now, I'm not sure you want to go in and hug your boss and do the dance like that, but there is a way to drop down into the heart and lead from that place. Eben, I'm curious. You came back, and as I know about you, you were an exceptionally head-based individual. Now you've touched love. You've touched source. You've touched Om. You're back, but I'm guessing, and maybe not because of the disease, there is still grooves in the record that are head-based. And I wondered how in the world you made that transition and kind of slammed it into the other gear.
Well, I must say for about the first 2 years or so after my coma, especially in retrospect, I would say in a sense I was a bit kind of schizophrenic in the sense that I knew from the experience the emotional power and engagement of the NDE was one of pure love, and how love is the binding force of the universe. So I knew that, having lived it, felt it, identified with it. And yet, the old me, the neurosurgeon who had spent those 15 years at Harvard and thought he understood brain, mind, consciousness, still kept defaulting to, well, it's all got to be somewhere up here, brain, mind, consciousness. I got to be focusing up here. But the love was so overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And I would say that a major breakthrough in my life came in late November of 2011. And that's when I met Karen. And she was the one who really helped me to open up much more broadly to kind of getting rid of those false boundaries and separations that had been revealed as so fake to me from my NDE. But she helped me to really just acknowledge that this is very much a form of heart consciousness, that we're all together, that this is about loving others, loving all of life, and seeing every bit of it as basically a facet of our, quote, selves. Because, in fact, the boundaries of self are somewhat illusory. And that's what all the modern study of consciousness, especially in the world of quantum physics, our understanding of one mind, one consciousness, from which all of reality emerges. And this is all very empowering to the individual human being, but it's all about getting back in touch with that heart and realizing that this form of consciousness and awareness is one that acknowledges that we are one with each other, with all other humans, with all other life, and that in fact we are very directly connected with the divine and infinitely loving source of the universe itself. There is no separation, and yet in our world, you kind of talk about separation. Our very language conspires to separate everything. But in reality, there is one truth, one heart, one love, one mind, and we're all sharing it.
Woohoo! How do we step out of our minds? The mind, in a sense, constructs this radical, I am separate, I am alone. It may have been what we were taught since childhood, and it makes it, well, it is one of the key problems is how do we understand consciousness coming from the perspective of our mind?
I would start by pointing out that the thoughts in my head, the little voice of my ego, the linguistic brain, that is not my consciousness. I love how Michael Singer refers to the voice in our head, especially the voice of the ego, as an annoying roommate. And that is a very proper way to look at it. Our consciousness, the part that is a deep mystery, whether you're talking about the hard problem of consciousness, which is really the impossibility of tracing the dots from the physical brain to conscious experience, or talking about what's known as the measurement paradox in quantum physics. They're two sides of the same coin. They're both looking at that observer, at that awareness. And that's what Karen and I help people to uncover and develop a stronger relationship with in our meditation play shops, is that conscious awareness. It's basically the self-awareness of the universe for its own existence. And each and every one of us is like a little eddy current of self-awareness of the universe, but we're all in the same stream. We're all sharing that same flow of consciousness. And I think this is very important. And the best way to get in touch with that is to realize by going within into a deep meditative space and developing that observer self, developing that kind of uniform connection with all that is, and come to realize that we are far, far more than just our little thoughts, our little kind of identity with self and our roles in the world as a human being. We are much, much more than that. And we share this grand power, this co-creative force of the universe that when I was deep in the core realm, I met full force, that God force, just as have millions and millions of souls met that very same loving force. That's the origin of all of our religious beliefs. All seekers throughout history have encountered this, and the more we explore that and come in touch with it by going within, and this is why I think the tools that Karen and her partner, business partner Kevin, bring to the world in the form of sacred acoustics are such valuable tools, because they are very good at helping us to really grow and nurture our connection and relationship with that infinite source of consciousness and of all being in the universe. And going far beyond those simplistic and false boundaries of self and just existing with our little linguistic brain and the voice of the ego.
Thank you. And you just gave me an epiphany here, which is I was going to ask next how Karen was able to drop you from head to heart. But what occurred to me is Karen works with the heart, and she plays with the heart, and she plays with the energy of the heart and expanding the energy of the heart. You can call it this heart bubble that radiates around Karen. You experienced pure love, heart, whatever word we want to put on this, when you were here but not here. When you came back and you met Karen, you tasted a piece of that again.
I think that's probably absolutely true. I mean, that's something that in my own recollections back on meeting her at that workshop where there were 20 other people involved in the same work, was that there was something kind of extraordinary about that connection. That was very strong about a sense of purpose and meaning and discovery. And yes, I feel that I did pick up on that intuitively, very powerfully. It was a driving force for me. I had, as you said, I had kind of tasted that, felt that before, and now I knew that I was back in the presence of that infinite loving force. So, yeah, it's astonishing. I'm glad you brought that up.
So Karen, how do I put this? What did you do to ride the wild horse?
Well, this is something we can all do. There's nothing special about any of us really on the planet except for our unique spark that we all have. But it really, I think I was doing it kind of naturally, but what really helped me explain it and understand what was going on was the work of heart math in California. And they've been studying the heart scientifically for a couple decades. And what they've learned is that electromagnetic field of the heart actually expands and contracts based on your emotional state. Your thoughts and emotions affect that field. What's really interesting is when you're in a love or happy or joy type of energy, that bubble, as you put it, is much larger. And if you're in maybe sad or anger or greed or jealousy, it's much smaller. Now, it's in the shape of a torus field coming out the top of the head, going around the body. What's really fascinating is experiments show that this heart field actually affects the people around you. So imagine yourself, this is why that imperative I was speaking about is so real. When you're walking around with sadness and anger and maybe a bad commute or bad weather, you put other people around you in a bad mood. You can't help it. But when you're putting love, like you did with your wife and your conflict, you know, when you put love and joy in your heart, you only affect people in positive ways. It is the ultimate golden rule. Treat others only how you would treat yourself by growing that love in your heart. Now, the very simple starting techniques is to simply generate a feeling of gratitude, something you're grateful for, not in your head, not with words. You can do that as well. But what does it feel like? And when I first learned about how to cultivate this, for me, that was puppies. Because I had a dog when I was about 6 years old that was a stray and suddenly gave birth to puppies under my bed. And to me, this was just a magical thing to have these wiggly, cute little puppies under my bed that I could play with. And that energy, remembering something from your childhood, something just innocent, maybe it's a view of a sunset, but something that makes you feel grateful. Feel that in your heart. And at first, it's not so simple. Don't think that if you can't do it, there's something wrong with you. I couldn't do it at first, generate it at will. But when you practice this on a daily basis, it really helps. So when Eben would talk about the love, he would say, oh, love this and love. And I would be like, well, do you love yourself? Have you grown that love inside your own heart? And he looked at me confused, like, what do you mean? How can I do that? He happens to have this, we call it his adoption wound, where he was given away at birth. And that kind of feeling of not being worthy of love has made it difficult for him, many other people around the world, myself too, at really realizing we can love ourselves. And it's not necessarily, when I heard of this term, love yourself, we hear that a lot. You should love yourself. We also hear you should put everyone before yourself. So it's a very confusing kind of thing. But loving yourself is very challenging because that means you need to direct love towards yourself. What I learned is when I would generate that gratitude in my heart, and slowly but surely I started to feel like a warm kind of radiation, shimmering, kind of glowing light description words really work well at describing what that love energy feels like. When you can really start to grow that, I started to realize, well, I can't love myself because I am the love. The love is within me. And so it turned into be the love that you are, as opposed to love and be love. Be the love that you are. And I remember coaching Eben on this, and he would do it. He would take time in his quiet space and generate that love. And you can explain how you do it at events.
Well, what I do really is I just start to feel that heart resonance. And I'm very aware of my own heart field, which I've gained through, these many years of meditation and focusing on it. But often what I do, in fact, I'd say I do it every time that when I'm in these group meditations, Karen is the one leading the meditation, but I get to participate. And the way I do that is by getting right down into my heart space. And I can see and feel and know and become that very field as it expands out. And it's resonating. The whole thing is vibrating. And what I then do is sense the heart fields of those in the audience. And I start feeling the information in those heart fields start to overlap, and you get constructive and destructive interference, just like with any wave-like informational system. But it's that coalescence of kind of common loving and emotional feeling of oneness and connection that starts to grow in those heart fields. And then you just feel all of us coming together through that. And I think that process for me is certainly one very powerful in kind of binding us all together and demonstrating and living that oneness of consciousness. But I also sense that it has a beneficial impact on many members of the audience. And that's just based on having done, more than 300 or so of these kind of workshops and the kind of feelings that we get from these interactions and the feedback that we get from people.
Well, and the heart math research shows that when they measure that electromagnetic field, it actually, generally speaking, is roughly 3 feet around your body. Like if you spread your arms out to the side, it kind of encompasses that, but it expands and grows. And every time they come up with a device to measure that field, we reach the maximum limit. So what does that tell? What that tells me is that our heart field is infinite. I don't know if that's the right scientific word, but that it goes on and on and on, and we manage it. I don't use the word control. I use the word manage. We manage that field we can manage it very consciously by managing our thoughts and emotions.
Thank you so much. When I think of this field and I think of what it feels like to be in an expanded, to be around somebody who has truly expanded this, I think of when I was on Maui and I ran into Whole Foods and I walked right into Ram Dass.
Yes!
There are no accidents.
Heart field is amazing.
His eyes, first off, were just a life. You could lose yourself in his eyes. It was a whole universe. And then the joy that just radiated off him. He's in a wheelchair. He has an assistant pushing him around. And it's like the sunlight or the sun itself is being pushed around the Whole Foods.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah. We write about this in the book, Living in a Mindful Universe. We had the beautiful honor of meeting and interacting with Ram Dass. And the first time I met him, we walked into a crowded Maui restaurant, and I felt my heart activate. And now this doesn't happen all the time. It happens occasionally. And I felt it, and I didn't know what it was. And I thought, oh my gosh, this feels good. What did I do to get this? And as I got closer, the people kind of spread out of the way, and there was Ram Dass in his wheelchair below all the other people. And I realized it was coming from him, exactly what you just described. Absolutely beautiful. And he wrote a book called Be Here Now. That's what kind of put him on the map back in the 70s. But a follow-up book was Be Love Now. And that's exactly what he does. He sits and radiates exactly what I was describing, and all of us can learn to do this. And then we start to affect our world without saying a word.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
Ooh.
What is one great way, on top of what you were just saying earlier, and we'll do a meditation in just a short bit, but what is one way we can start to be love now?
Well, it really is the first step, very key, is generating that feeling of gratitude in your heart, practicing that, step one. Step two is imagining that you're breathing in and out of your heart. You can do this when you're driving, when you're in a meeting, when you're in a line, when you're lying in bed. There's, no special tools required. We have sound recordings that also can go with it, but that's not required. Imagine you're breathing in and out of your heart instead of your nose and mouth. It can do absolute wonders. Heart math calls it coherence too, when you can match your breathing to your heartbeat. So not all of us can feel our heartbeat. You can put your hand on your heart to feel it. So imagine that as you're breathing, you breathe out for 4 heartbeats, breathe in for 4 heartbeats. You can pick whatever number you want, maybe 5 or 6, whatever works for you. But tuning your awareness to your heartbeat, matching it with your breath, causes coherence, is HeartMath's term for it. And that lowers your immune system. It affects your parasympathetic nervous system. It brings you into a quiet space. It makes you more clear. It makes you more receptive to intuitive information. This is easy, simple, no difficulty with this at all.
Woohoo!
Woohoo!
Thank you so much. Where does the power of prayer fit in?
You want to?
I would say that prayer is a way of kind of getting in touch with that universal mind, with that co-creative force that is binds us all together through the infinite healing power of love. And prayer is just a way of appealing to that force. But I think it's important to point out, I noticed after my coma that my kind of use of prayer and my experience of prayer changed significantly. Because I learned in my coma experience that I could have great trust in the universe and that the right things are the things that will happen. As long as I'm carrying love in my heart and loving this world to the best of my ability and loving and sensing that kind of common sense of purpose and of meaning in my existence with that of the whole universe. And that, of course, includes all other beings in the universe. So prayer for me has become a way of acknowledging trust that I will be taken care of, and also that statement, all is well. Those were the first words that I uttered when I came out of coma. And they were at a time when I was still, I don't even remember saying those words. That was all reported to me later by others who were at the bedside. But all is well is a very crucial concept. And it really involves taking a big enough view that we can realize that this world is taking care of us. And in spite of the badness, the apparent evil, the illness, injury, the other hardships and challenges we face, when we take that broader view, we come to appreciate that the universe will take care of us and that things that may seem unfavorable now are simply serving as kind of the engines of the lessons we are to learn. It's how we deal with the hardships and difficulties in life that allows us to grow. And so for me now, this prayer is really just a form of offering gratitude, realizing that gratitude is the only appropriate response to every single breath I take, but also of recognizing that oneness, that binding force of love, and this tremendous trust that the universe will take care of me. So prayer has shifted dramatically into much more one of allowance, of gratitude, not necessarily asking for a certain outcome, although you can certainly visualize what you want to be the outcome for health of loved ones and others, for a good, a good life for those around us and for ourselves. But really, prayer has shifted dramatically and much more reflects that trust and gratitude, and that I will be taken care of.
Thank you so much, Eben. What would if you don't mind me asking, what would a prayer look like or sound like, or how do you begin a prayer?
Well, for me, they are all involved now with very focused meditation using sacred acoustics. And so when I talk about that form of meditation, for me, that is, in every case, it is a form of centering prayer. That is a form of, first of all, stating an intention, making a request,
Mm-hmm.
then admitting tremendous gratitude for everything that is, and then just kind of settling right down into that heart space, which involves a consciousness that then overflows those false boundaries of self and starts to interact with the consciousness and the higher souls of all beings involved in whatever may be the issue that the prayer involves, whether it's for health or healing, for a good outcome, for comfort, for spiritual growth in myself and others. Every bit of it becomes kind of an outgrowth of that meditative experience with a broad connection with that universal mind and an allowance of gratitude and trust and acceptance and, kind of thy will be done attitude about it all. But that's really when I talk about prayer and meditation, that's what it involves.
So it's feelings, if you haven't noticed.
It's absolutely
as opposed to words.
Richly into feelings and not into concepts at all, not into thoughts and kind of, the linguistic underpinnings of rational and logical structure. But it really is, as Karen says, it's that feeling, that awareness of love, of connection, of purpose and meaning.
It also sounds like, particularly you're using the music, you're getting into a different brainwave state. You're getting into coherence. You're getting into a higher vibrational alignment. And that's where you can kind of put the quarters in the token or in the jukebox there, and something special happens when you're there. Say that again?
I said feeding the machine, exactly.
Yes. So maybe for both of you or for Karen in particular, how do we start waking up today?
Well, first of all, it's very important to put aside any hardcore beliefs that you may have. Now, they could be political, religious, they could be personal beliefs like, I'm not attractive or something like that. Put aside all those kind of underlying beliefs because they affect our experience in ways that are often really unaware. We're often unaware that they're affecting. So starting from scratch, Eben is a beautiful example of this because when he had his near-death experience, he had that complete amnesia. Mm-hmm. So when he first woke up, I picture him like a little Buddha, as he described, saying, all is well, looking at all his family members. And he had this fresh, innocent, we'll say in the tarot card, there's the Fool, the first card, the kind of childlike innocence, just starting out in the world with no preconceived notions. This would be a beautiful place to begin. And from that neutral kind of space, wide open to whatever possibilities might come forward, find a meditative space and practice that neutrality. And then when you start to get, reintroduced to some of your beliefs, maybe political, religious, or whatnot, look at them from a fresh perspective. Why do I believe that? Was it because my parents did? It's really important to evaluate because so many people out there think they're right and the other person is wrong. And we're sitting here talking about universal truths. Those polarities you kind of mentioned early on, they really do seem to be rising in this world. But what Eben and I have come to realize is that a rise in those polarities is actually a sign of real fundamental change coming to our world. And so realizing that many things we've been taught maybe aren't necessarily true, such as the physical is all that exists, many beliefs out there that actually aren't true, that many of us cling to. That would be a beautiful way to begin the process of waking up, is to understand that what you think you know may actually not be the truth.
Woohoo! What was it like swimming and being with the whales?
Oh my gosh. Well, for me, I'll start because that was another situation. The same week we were meeting Ram Dass in Maui, we had this opportunity to go out in kayaks into the bay of Maui in the hopes of spotting some whales. And the woman who was with us, we were in two double kayaks. Eben and I were in one, the other two women were in the other. And she says to me, "Hey, Karen, what sound would you make if you were trying to attract a whale?" And I started, making whale sounds, from Star Trek 4 and other sources. And that's when, within moments, a whale popped out of the ocean. And I felt that I was feeling the heart resonance of that whale before he popped out, or she, because as it happens, a little baby whale, little meaning as big as a school bus, also popped out. And we were actually there with a mother and baby whale. And Eben actually jumped in with them for a moment.
I had mass snorkeling fins and jumped in the water, and absolutely kind of indescribable. So beautiful to be there in their world, feeling extremely small, but also very much part of it. And I remember seeing them down below the water, and the baby would kind of go down underneath and playing with the mother. And it was just, I mean, for me, it was a magical moment. One of those things where if you could just suspend that one little moment, it would be worth everything in your life to have that as your existence. It was just so beautiful.
What was so amazing, too, is they were playing with us. I think they came right over to us. We all ended up making that whale sound together, kind of this loud kind of kind of sound. And when that whale popped up, I can't help but think we attracted it to us, because we did not see any movement on the entire horizon, 360 degrees, until it just popped up right in front of us. And they rolled around, they flapped their little fins and blew water out, and we just laughed and laughed. And when it was time to go, other people were out searching for whales like we were, and I think they saw our little whale party going on and started heading our way. And that's when the whales decided to kind of make their departure. Okay, this was just a party for you guys. And the little baby whale, before they left, did a full breach jump out of the water. Just absolutely amazing. Just 40 feet away from us.
Yeah, very, very close.
Unbelievable. And yet we were safe. We were completely safe with these whales. Very loving energy.
Woohoo!
It was a big woohoo.
How do you help people, particularly parents, to help their kids to live in and embrace and come back to this magical world?
Well, I have a beautiful opportunity now to coach my daughter in how to raise her brand new son. And looking back, I was in my 20s when she was born. My daughter was born. I had a different kind of way of dealing with the world back then. But I did kind of raise her with this idea that our behavior and thoughts and attitude shape our unfolding reality. Now, at first, she didn't really buy into all that, because she had a lot of problems in her life and couldn't believe she had created them. But now she looks back and realizes Mom was right. And that was very beautiful. So fortunately, I think she will actually be open to some of this coaching. And I would coach exactly what I was saying earlier about teaching this child how to feel his heart space, how to grow from a space of loving energy every single day. I think it's so important to not only when we're raising our children have that love energy available to them, but also when they're in the womb, when they're growing. We tend to think, oh, we don't really have to raise our baby till he pops out. But I also encouraged my daughter, who kind of suffers from anxiety, so that concerned me. I said, well, generate that feeling of gratitude as often as you can and make your baby feel safe and loved. We want our babies to come into the world feeling safe and loved and continue. Now, of course, they have to learn things. We have to tell them, no, this is not some extreme kind of thing, but always knowing that they're loved. That is one thing that I successfully did with my daughter. All the problems she had, we write about a couple of them in Living in a Mindful Universe, but she had a rough teenage life, and she was kind of hard to love, as some teenagers are. But I did. I loved her unconditionally, no matter what. I would tell her, your behavior is bothering me, but I still love you. You are a beautiful being, trying to grow and learn. And you're learning your lessons this way. Other people learn them other ways. There's so many approaches that we can use with our children to make them realize they are very empowered. They are not victims of the world around them. Many of us feel that way. We actually have much more power than we've been led to believe. And I think children who know this from a very young age, they will make our world a better place as they become our leaders and our doctors, our teachers, our ministers, our government leaders. We have a lot. If we can do that with our children, we have a lot of hope for our future.
Woohoo! You sound like words of wisdom from the woman on the butterfly.
Very
well,
much.
thank you. Thank
Very
you.
much.
Yeah, having a new baby in your life really makes you think about things freshly than you did when you were raised. Now I get this grandparent energy is it's so different because you think, oh my gosh, if only I had known all of this when I was raising my own daughter.
So what, well, a few quick wrap-up questions, then maybe time for a short meditation. What brings both of you the greatest happiness, or what I call the woohoo factor?
Wow.
Well, can I go out on a limb here and say it's being together?
Well, heck yeah.
Me and him.
It is that's a really, really good thing.
Until today, it's not that I didn't understand, but the fit, I now completely understand on such a deep level, the energetic back and forth and how it fits together and how one voices and the other it feels, and it just makes so much beautiful, perfect sense, the two of you guys. It's so, so special.
Well, when we met, we felt it, but we didn't understand it. We felt this energy, this connection, this almost, oh my gosh, now I'm complete. It sounds so cliche. It sounds so cliche from a movie, you complete me, but it actually is what it felt like. And it was so strange because connections I had before with men weren't like that. Of course, I felt connected and had a connection, but this is a completely different quality, and it actually anytime there's conflict, it doesn't matter. It's just kind of amusing. It's so interesting, and yes, it's our greatest joy is being together.
Yeah, it was really this extraordinary sense of basically, I felt like we'd known each other, extremely closely as young children. It was that kind of thing where, oh my God, running back into that
the familiarity.
The familiarity was very striking. So it was confusing to us for a while to try and figure it all out. But as we came to acknowledge in those first few days and weeks that it was very much of a common kind of mission and something really for humanity that was shared between us, but now had far more power, but was really just a kind of a resurrection of an old energy, an old alliance, an old shared purpose and mission in life that, from my point of view, could have come from lifetimes ago. But it was extremely strong and kind of clear, very clear to me at the get-go, although I'd say Karen was a bit resistant initially, but it was very clear to me that we had this common mission and that I wanted to discover more about that.
Jessica said to me, I will never, ever date you.
Ever.
Oh, she made it perfectly clear. And then she clicked on Match.com and said, I'm going out with this person. 3 weeks. 3 weeks.
Yes, and here you are.
Yeah. Woohoo! And you guys are truly, truly blessed. So a few quick wrap-up questions. First off, where can people go to find out more and to find your beautiful books, including Living in a Mindful Universe?
Well, people can certainly go to EbenAlexander.com. That's E-B as in Baker, E-N Alexander.com. And I would encourage people to participate. If you click on, go to EbenAlexander.com homepage, right there in the front is a banner that'll wiggle in your face. It says, your 33-day journey into the heart of consciousness. It's a free 33-day email course that introduces some of the major topics of the book. Also comes with certain kind of gifts and suggestions for daily practice, as well as with tools in the form of links, in the form of some sacred acoustics recordings, every bit of it completely free. And the best part about it is there's a comment section on each of those 33-day pages where people leave their comments, their experiences, their own journeys. They help each other. And that comment page also, the whole page comes with a 20 language translate function. So people from all over the world are participating in growing this beautiful community. It's a great way of no soul left behind, getting everybody included in this, and we strongly encourage your listeners to participate in this 33-day course that they can find at EbenAlexander.com.
And you can also go to sacredacoustics.com and learn more about the sound recordings we've been briefly discussing. There's a free download if you put in your email, and some free training videos where I explain how these can work, with some guest appearances from Eben in those training videos.
Fantastic, fantastic. So if you didn't catch EbenAlexander.com and sacredacoustics.com, come on over to inspirenationshow.com and we'll get you over to EbenAlexander.com and sacredacoustics.com. Any last words of wisdom you both want to share before a brief meditation?
I think, the only thing I'd like to add is every soul is absolutely crucial to this evolution of consciousness. Each and every person on Earth, no matter where they stand on the spectrum of kind of knowing themselves and knowing the oneness of the universe, or still being kind of frightfully locked away from the rest of people in this world. Of course, nobody really is. All souls are involved. And so I would just like to encourage your listeners to explore inside, go within their mental space, and in any fashion that you enjoy, and start to develop your relationship with that higher soul, with that source of consciousness that is infinitely powered, and come to appreciate the love that you will be taken care of, and that you have tremendous influence on your life. And it all begins with recovering that love for self, that love for others, and that sense of connection with the universe. The world is a very exciting, extraordinary, awakening place, and each and every soul is deeply involved in that process.
Ditto.
Woohoo!
Big woohoo.
I'm like speechless. I am so honored and thankful to have had you on the show today, both of you guys. I cannot say that enough. This has been so incredibly beautiful, heartfelt, and if the audience feels at all what I'm feeling, profound.
Well, thank you. And we are honored to be here. And just hope that this heart energy is something that your listeners will all come to appreciate, know, feel, and grow with and nurture.
So important.
It's been a blessing to be with you today. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Karen, would you have time for a brief meditation of your calling?
Yes, sure.
So for anyone, if you're driving down the road, probably want to do this afterwards. If not, I'm just going to leave it to you, Karen.
Okay. So I invite you to close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Inhale. Exhale. Now, as you inhale, silently say, let. As you inhale, silently say, go. Let go. Now, move your awareness to your heart center. Imagine your breath is moving in and out of your heart. As you breathe out, imagine your breath is filling up a bubble surrounding your entire body. As you breathe in, imagine your breath is coming back to you from all points of that bubble, back into your heart. Now, as you continue to breathe this way, imagine that bubble grows to the size of the entire earth. And as you exhale, imagine your breath is moving out to all points of the earth, filling up the entire earth with your breath. And as you breathe in, imagine your breath is coming from all points of the earth, back into your heart. Now, as you feel this expansion, imagine your awareness moving down into the center of the earth, feeling grounded with this energy. Now, imagine your awareness comes back up from the earth and into your heart. Feel the centering of your energy and your connection to all that is. And as you feel ready, open your eyes and take this with you throughout your day, knowing that you can tap into that heart energy, yours and the entire world's, at any time you wish. Okay.
Woohoo!
A little more relaxed woohoo.
Oh, absolutely. Jello. Woohoo.
Yes, lemon jello.
I like it, and I look like it. Thank you both so, so much. What an honor, a treasure, and a treat this has been.
Thank
Michael,
you.
thanks for having us.
Thank
Thank you
you
so much.
Thank you.
So, real joy, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Absolutely. Got to crank it back up for the finish then. For everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get living in a mindful universe, and begin diving into your heart today and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you guys so, so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. It's been wonderful talking with you again.
Good questions.
Always very energizing. Thank you, Mike. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!